Alright, all you glorious gamers out there, welcome to the PlayerStoo Podcast, the video game podcast for gamers like you, by gamers like you. You can find PlayerStoo on all the social media, that is Facebook, Twitter, YouTube, Instagram, the lot. You can also find our written content over at PlayerStoo.com, that's PlayerStoo.com. And if you could take 5 seconds to give us 5 stars over on Apple Podcasts or wherever you get your podcasts, that really helps us out. It does a huge amount for the exposure of the show. And thank you so much to anyone that's already done that for us. It genuinely means a huge amount. You're an absolute legend to us. Alright, and on with the show. My name is Mark Henderson. With me, as always, Mr. Lewis Camley. How's it going, Lewis?
Going very well, Mark. Pretty exhausted this week from another couple of busy days, but yeah, I'm alright. How's things with you?
Not bad at all. Are we ready to get into our Elden Ring portion of the podcast list? Because it'll be going on for months still, because the game is huge. It's so much bigger than I even thought.
Is it too big? That's my question.
Well, this is the ultimate question, perhaps, Liz. I'm not really sure that we can answer that. It might be too big for us.
Yeah.
How are you getting on?
Yeah, I've been playing a little bit this week, not tons and tons, to be honest. I don't have loads to add from where I've been recently, to be honest. I've been making slow but steady progress through some of the legacy dungeons and a wee bit of mopping up around the northern edge of Liurna, but I've not really progressed very much in terms of story or really in terms of any certainty about what's going on or what I'm trying to achieve.
You're becoming Elden Lordless, for God's sake, man.
I know I'm doing that, and I know that there's a dung eater at some point ahead of me, but that's about all I've made out of things so far. No, but seriously, like, I'm still loving it, but yeah, I can't say that other than kind of mopping up some great sections. I've really enjoyed parts of Liurna. I wish it was slightly smaller. I felt like Limgrave was a bit easier to explore than the lakes have been, but you know, it's been a fantastic kind of area to explore, and I'm just diving into the Carrion Manor now, which is towards the northern edge of that part of the map. A couple of bosses there to be dealt with, and then I think onto Caelid after that, which I gather is where you have now headed into the hellscape that is on the northwest corner of the map.
Indeed. We will come on to that in but a moment, Lewis. I have managed to, I think, overtake you now, Lewis, I've got to tell you. I'm not sure if you see that as fortunate or unfortunate.
You told me what level you're at earlier, and you're about 10 to 15 levels beyond me now.
Oh, wow, easily. I didn't realise I was that far ahead. Yeah, I managed to get a good bit of gaming time in this week, I've got to say. So, done all the bosses that you'd previously done in Relicaria, sort of done that whole Liurnia section now. I am now fully into the swing of my Dex/Arcane build. I'm currently running around wielding 2 katanas, which has been a whole load of fun. I am now in, Caelid, which is, whoa, it fucking sucks, Lewis. It's not a good area. I've not been enjoying it massively, I've got to say. Honestly, like, quite genuinely, I've been finding it incredibly infuriating, mainly because of the 2 sort of main enemies that you find roaming around the area, or at least at the beginning anyway. I've currently got to another section of Caelid where I'm sort of fighting different types of enemies, and it's not so bad at all, really. It really is just these 2 enemy types, which I won't spoil for you because I'm sort of wanting you to go in unprepared for what to expect in a lot of ways.
Fair enough.
But man, like, honestly, every time you get in an encounter with these enemies, it is a fucking joyless fight. It really is. And frankly, I cannot wait to be done with this area and go back to the Atlas Plateau, which I had much more fun in with even the small amount of time that I was in there. But look, despite my lack of enjoyment in my last play session, I'm still very much enjoying the game. It's fantastic. It probably is undeniably one of the best games ever made, to be honest. I think I'm sort of already there in saying that, to be honest. It really is an incredible experience to play through. It's just that this current bit that I'm in really fucking sucks balls, Liz. It really is not good.
I mean, in my experience and from what I've heard of other FromSoft games that I've not played, this kind of always happens. There's always at least one bit or one batch of enemies that are just pretty awful to play against. And I think sometimes as well, I mean, Caelid does look notoriously bad. People are talking about it in those terms, but sometimes it's just, you just have a bad session and you're not quite at your sharpest, and you don't quite manage to land a hit hits on certain enemies that another time you'd play it would be fine. I'm not saying
not
that's
though.
what's going
they
on
do
here.
Suck.
Yeah,
they
no,
do still
I mean
suck.
that's absolutely fair enough. And there's, as I say, there's always bits like that just get to you. But I think the variety that this map has is so incredible for that. You know, there are these big wide open spaces, there are beautiful vistas, there's these horrible places like Caelid. You know, the enemy variety within them as well.
Sure, yeah.
Because of the nature of the game, I don't think it's really been spoken about in any great sense in that way, like how big and expansive and broad it is. Obviously people have talked about how deep it is and how long it is, but you know, going on a deep dive on the absolute variety that this game throws at you, the way that we would talk about the various biomes of a game like Horizon, you know, that's the kind of geography and that kind of thing hasn't really been, as far as I've seen, being discussed at any great length, and that's something that I think will come over time. Like, people are still just breaking into this game, and there's so much. I bet you there's still tons of lore stuff that we don't know anything about that, you know, will be discovered for months, if not years ahead.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, that is how deep the game is, and I do love just diving into like YouTube videos on the lore and stuff like that.
Yeah.
And there's some people online that get really, really geeky about it and do like incredible, like genuinely like almost documentary style stuff on the lore of these games, and it's really, really fascinating to learn about. But right now, just trying to sort of stay away from all that, still not using any guides or anything like that really. Although, to be fair, I did need a little nudge in the direction of where to go after Relicaria, I've got to be honest. But yeah, I'm still sort of trying to experience the game very much firsthand. Not really looked up guides, not looked up how to beat any of the difficult bosses or anything like that yet, you know. I think the only thing that I really did look up was just to get my build right, just to make sure that I wasn't wasting my time or whatever. But I've now learned as well that you can respec your character relatively easily in this game, which I'm not sure was really available in any other FromSoft game so far as I'm aware. So even if I did make a total arse of it, I could just respec now and knowing a bit more about the game and how you want to play it, you know, which is always good. It also means that you can just totally change your character at some point in the future, which is really interesting as well. But yeah, still really enjoying it. I won't prattle on about it too much, although I could definitely continue to talk about it all day, Liz.
Yeah, our pre-rehearsal-y part of this has got much longer from our chats about Elden Ring.
Yeah, because we keep on talking about bloody Elden Ring, not talking about our rundown of the podcast. Yeah. Anyway, ladies and gentlemen, let's move on to the news, and we'll save more Elden Ring for next week and the week after and the month after that probably as well. Alright, list news item number 1. PlayStation have finally released some details of the games that will be available on their PlayStation Plus subscription service at launch. And not a moment too soon, I have to say, Lewis, because this service is supposedly going live in Asia next week. I would say, as a generalisation, the PlayStation 4/5 games that are available are pretty good, or even really good, I would say. Basically, everything you would expect to be there is there. Any PlayStation Studios game which released on the PlayStation 4 or 5, up to and including Returnal, I think are all there, with the exception of The Last of Us Part 2, which is the most glaring omission, I suppose, and I think might be getting a little bit of special treatment here, if I'm honest, Liz. There is also a pretty healthy selection of third-party games on the PlayStation 4/5 front, including big AAAs like Mortal Kombat 11, Marvel's Guardians of the Galaxy, Red Dead Redemption 2, Assassin's Creed Valhalla, and Final Fantasy 15, as well as a pretty nice, but albeit relatively short selection of indie games, including Celeste, Hollow Knight, Dead Cells, Outer Wilds, and The Artful Escape. I do genuinely think that is a pretty fantastic offering, really, from PlayStation on that front. I'm pretty happy with that. However, it's when we get onto the classic catalogue where things start to fall down a little bit, in my mind anyway. So the highlights from the PlayStation 1 games that will be available on the service at launch are Ape Escape, Scythe and Filter, Tekken 2, and I would argue that's about it, and to be honest with you, that is most of the games as well. There's currently one PSP game, which is Super Stardust Portable by Housemarque, which is a game I've never even heard of. There are currently no PlayStation 2 games that aren't also remakes/remasters. The highlights from the remaster/remakes section are Ape Escape 2, the Dark Cloud games, the Jak and Daxter games, Bioshock, and the Borderlands collection. The PlayStation 3 games, I would say, are basically fine. The highlights there being the original Dark Souls game, which is there, as well as the Blue Point remake, as is the original Shadow of the Colossus game, as well as the Blue Point remake of that, along with Ico, the Infamous games, most but not all of the PS3 Ratchet and Clank games, Resistance 3 but not the other Resistance games for some reason, and the downside of all the PlayStation 3 games is of course that they are streaming only, and that all stems back to how the PlayStation 3's processor worked, and it's all about complicated jumbled mess that's still biting them in the arse all this time down the line, Liz. They've also announced their list of time-limited trials, which consist of the Uncharted Legacy of Thieves collection, Horizon Forbidden West, Cyberpunk 2077, Farming Simulator 2022, Tiny Tina's Wonderland, and WWE 2K22. You would expect those PlayStation games to be there, basically the two most recent PlayStation games, but the others are just sort of like fine, I would say. And basically I think that's where it comes down to it. I think that the extra tier of the PlayStation Plus subscription with those PlayStation 4/5 games is actually a really good offering, I think anyway. But if you're holding those classic games and the timed trials behind that premium tier, I don't think there'll be a lot of people, at least at launch, who are bending over backwards to go and run out and pay for that catalogue of games, you know? It's also worth adding here that Ubisoft have announced that Ubisoft Plus will also be coming to PlayStation, with a selection of Ubisoft Plus classics coming to PlayStation Plus at the extra/premium tier. There are currently 27 Ubisoft classic games, and I think that will be 50 by the end of the year, according to Ubisoft. These include Assassin's Creed Valhalla, which we already said, Far Cry 3, 4, and Blood Dragon, the South Park games For Honor and Watch Dogs. It is also worth pointing out that Ubisoft Plus will be coming to Xbox at some point as well, although the date for that has not yet been announced, and it is not yet clear if something similar to these Ubisoft Plus classics will be getting an equivalent release on Games Pass as well. Sony have said that these games on the list are just a selection of the games that they have planned for the service, which they had previously said would be a library of over 700 games, including 400 downloadable PlayStation 4/5 games. So, Lewis, it looks as if there is more to come, but what are your thoughts on the PlayStation Plus lineup at launch?
Where to begin, really? I'm finding it hard to be especially excited about any of this. Not that there's anything wrong with it either. Like, I think it's a pretty fine lineup. Can't complain too much at all, really, about the newest games coming to it. The only other game that I think I've noticed is missing from that kind of PS4/5 batch is, oddly, Sackboy's Big Adventure, which is an odd miss.
Oh, that's interesting. I didn't notice that.
Yeah, I can't think why that would be there. There may be one or two others, but yeah, the standout there, as you say, is The Last of Us Part 2, and that will be interesting, telling maybe about what Sony's plan for this all is, or how they are viewing it, because it does feel to me like that is the absentee because they still think they can make money from it, or that there's going to be some
that is 100% the reason.
Yeah, is that because they're about to launch or announce a multiplayer version, or is it because of the TV show and the rumoured remake of the first game? Maybe that's going to come in a package with the second game, so they're not going to do this just now. Whatever, we could go on about that some other time. But to me, if you're coming to PS4 or PS5 and you can get access to these games, that's fantastic. It does just feel a little bit like the PS Plus collection refreshed a year later for me in that sense for these games. But great to have, particularly for me at least, Demon's Souls come to this, the PS5 remake of Demon's Souls and one or two other games, and there's nothing much else there that I'm like, oh great, I finally got access to that. But obviously we play a lot of PlayStation games and a lot of the third party and indie games that are kind of part of that.
Exactly. I think we're a bad example actually of the people that this will appeal to most, because most of the great games on there we have already played, but for a lot of people that won't be the case, Yeah,
for a lot of people it won't be the case, but also for a lot of people who have had PlayStation Plus, as long as us, who might not be that bothered about a lot of different games, they probably will have a lot of this already. And if anyone who's got a subscription will have a batch of these on PS5 at least through the collection. So it's an improvement, but it does feel still kind of a ways off the offer that Xbox gives you in terms of new and first party games, which is something we'll come on into, but when you dive deeper into these offerings, yeah, the classic games, it's just not good enough, really, is it? There's not enough there.
Not really.
I don't say that in a really entitled, like, oh, we deserve way more than that. They just have way more than this, and they could have put it on there. I had forgotten that they'd said that thing about, 700 games eventually. I'm really hopeful that they are sticking with that, and it is going to keep being added to. And I was encouraged as well that at the bottom of the blog post it talks about their kind of plans to still add new games at the essential tier, same as we've always known PS Plus to be, but that also they're going to do a sort of each month they'll do a refresh of the library, essentially in the same way that Game Pass does, although I imagine that it's going to be much more additions of smaller games and classic games than it is going to be new games the way that Game Pass does. So, that library will expand a bit, but as you say, there's nothing there that makes me want to jump in at the highest tier, I've got to say. There's one or two PS3 games that I would play, but I would maybe pay for the service for like a month and play through ICO, basically.
Yeah, sure.
I don't really see any need to do it any more than that. And for the game trials as well, again, hopefully that expands. It's a nice mix of games, something like WWE 2K22, which is just out, like that's good to have that there as well from a third party perspective. Wonder if Cyberpunk is there as a bit of an apology from CD Projekt Red to Sony after all that shitstorm. But yeah, that whole program needs to build out for me to really find it worth paying that extra wee bit to get the time trials as well,
Well, if we are to believe the latest reports, apparently every game coming to PlayStation, as long as you're above a certain threshold, however much money it was or whatever, will have to offer these game trials at some point. Again, this is just the starting post, So I suppose those trials are only ever going to get bigger. In terms of the PlayStation 4/5 stuff, again, this is the starting position. Do you know what I mean? I think that we are in a very privileged position where we have played a lot of these games, I do have to say. But I'm not sure what Sony could have done more there, really. I mean, they've put their whole back catalogue, basically, of PlayStation 4 and 5 games on there, apart from The Last of Us, as we've discussed. Maybe they could have got more third-party stuff, I suppose, but I mean, they have Red Dead there, they have new Assassin's Creed. I mean, it's not a bad offering, I don't think, certainly not as a starting position. And in terms of new games coming there, in terms of coming on like day one or something like that, I don't really think that is a thing that PlayStation are going to look to do by their own admission. But most things come to Games Pass a few months down the line, and I think that we could end up seeing sort of tandem releases of games in the future, like, yep, it's going to be out for 3 months, and then it'll be coming to PlayStation Plus and Games Pass on X date. You know what I mean? That's the sort of thing I'm expecting to see. I honestly do think that this is a pretty good start. With the exception of those classic games, I basically don't think that the premium tier is worth it at all just now. If those libraries begin to expand at some point, sure, this could be absolutely fantastic. But right now, I think that the clear value play here, the clear bit where it's worth the most to most gamers, is probably that extra tier. If you see 2 or even 3 games on there, that's probably worth more than your subscription for the year to go out and buy those games, particularly if they're PS5 games and they're 70 quid a pop.
Yeah,
you know what I mean?
100% there.
So I think the extra is probably the tier that most people will end up. And frankly, right now, looking at this, it'll be the tier I end up as well.
Yeah, 100% agree with that. And yeah, if it expands, great. It is a good start. It's just not a massively exciting, overwhelming start, but fair enough.
Alright, loose news item number 2. Bethesda have officially delayed Starfield and Redfall to the first half of 2023. Now, before we get into this list and before we start discussing a lot of the narrative around these delays, I want to unambiguously say that I think that this is the right move for these games. If the games are not going to be ready by the end of this year, delay them, make them right, put out the games when they're in a good, proper state to be consumed by your fans. I might be in the minority here, but I never really thought Starfield was going to hit that 11/11/22 release date in a million years. And to be honest with you, I thought it was a bit stupid that they put that date on it, like a hard date on it like that. However, this does mean that Xbox and Bethesda are currently slated to release, and let me just tot up the totals here, Lewis, 0 games this year. Absolutely none. And as things currently stand, PlayStation Studios will have released more games to Games Pass this year than Xbox Studios, which is absolutely insane, that being MLB The Show 2022. Xbox CEO Phil Spencer has got a little bit of heat because of this, and rightly so, I think, because I think a lot of Xbox gamers are obviously disappointed in this. But subsequently, Phil Spencer has made this statement on Twitter regarding the delays.
These decisions are hard on teams making the games and our fans. While I fully support giving teams time to release these great games when they are ready, we hear the feedback. Delivering quality and consistency is expected. We will continue to work to better meet those expectations.
This all comes after Xbox Game Studios head Matt Booty said in the wake of the Bethesda deal that they wanted to get to a point where they were releasing a new game every quarter. Obviously, that has not materialised yet. We do obviously as well have the Xbox presentation coming in just a few weeks in reality in June, which could easily change this landscape. But as of right now, it's a pretty sad looking year if you're an Xbox gamer, Lewis.
Yeah, it definitely is. I mean, this was maybe not a surprise, but it's still a bit shocking to get an announcement like this, the two games together, the entire slate for Xbox for the year, and rightfully it's raised questions. And I'm glad even that it's kind of got to the point where Phil Spencer feels that he has to say something about it, because, yeah, whilst I totally agree, delay the games if that's what's needed, and certainly Redfall, I'm not sure I even realised we were talking about Redfall coming for this year, to be honest. Like,
that was supposed to come out before Starfield.
I mean, that was just never going to happen. When that got announced, I remember us saying at the time as well, like, they've just put out Deathloop, how can they possibly, I know there's a couple of different parts of Arcane, but still to pivot that quickly and to release a game like ostensibly 1 year later, I just never saw that coming. Anyway, that's a diversion. For both of these games to slip into next year, it is fair enough for the development of the games, but for Xbox, yeah, you've been given nothing as part, and you know, think about everything that Xbox is supposed to be doing just now. The whole point of Game Pass, really at its heart, is to give you first party games day and date on release, and there aren't any this year. I think Grounded is the only thing that technically that they're releasing, even though it's been out for 2 years.
Well, yeah, it's coming out of early access this year, but I'm not counting that as a new game.
No, and you know, and it's not going to move the needle anyway. Like that, the point is they're supposed to be big games released by these big publishers each year, and they haven't really done it. I don't know, that adds to that sense that we were discussing a couple of weeks ago about how even the big indies that they, and the big third party games that they're backing by putting them onto Game Pass day one, are often not really hitting the mark either. So despite being the best deal in gaming and there being so much on there, it is missing a killer blow at the moment, Game Pass, and I think that's a tough position for Xbox to be in.
True. I mean, I don't disagree with anything that you've said there. I think that rightfully questions have been asked about potentially the planning, but at the same time there's obviously been a lot of upheaval at Xbox over the past few years with the Bethesda purchase and with the Activision purchase now. But yeah, I'm not sure quite what's gone wrong here, but to have a whole calendar year where it looks as if you're not releasing anything is pretty bad. What I will say is that at this showcase in June, I'm expecting at least a couple of games to be announced for this year, specifically Hellblade. I would be very surprised if that didn't come this year, but it's not a great look right now, to be honest. Do you know what I mean? And having said that, I have to also admit, like, it wouldn't surprise me too much, basically, if they didn't actually have anything ready for this year, because if they did, I would have thought that they would have told us by now, you know?
Yeah, I totally agree with that. I can't really see why, if Hellblade is going to come out this year, why they wouldn't have said that thus far, but that does look like maybe the furthest along on their slate that we're currently aware of. Very hard to imagine that they've got something that none of us are expecting and it's going to be ready in the next few months. So I wouldn't be surprised more to see them at this big showcase announce some major third-party Game Pass acquisitions. Like, I think that might be what they hang the end of the year on. But even what that could be, I'm not sure. There doesn't feel like there's too many major games like that they could pinch, you know?
Yeah, no, it's an interesting one, this. It really is. I'm not quite sure what to make of it all. All right, Lewis, news item number 3. CEO of Take-Two, Strauss Zelnick, has said that he currently has no plans to discuss acquiring FIFA's license, while in the same fucking breath complimenting FIFA's brand and saying that he wants to expand his sports franchises. So I'd be taking that with a massive grain of salt. Specifically, Zelnick has said this in an interview with IGN.
We are definitely interested in expanding our opportunities in sports, and FIFA has a great brand and incredible clout, but we have no current plans to discuss.
I mean, it would be fucking wild to me if they weren't at least having conversations with FIFA about getting their hands on that license. Do you know what I mean? To me, you can almost hear the cheeky wink he is obviously trying to give in this statement. Do you know what I mean? It feels to me as if he's saying, yeah, there's no way we are in discussions with FIFA, wink, but we really love them and we think that they're super cool and we think that we can make money if we had that franchise. Do you know what I mean? I think that it would be shocking if they weren't pursuing this. And I think that for Take-Two and their 2K division, obviously, it makes a lot of sense for them to have FIFA. They have a proven track record of making huge amounts of money from sports games, like EA did. They're obviously one of the only publishers left that could afford the $1 billion every 4 years that FIFA are apparently asking for their brand. And I also think that they're probably one of the remaining publishers that would actually want to make these games as well. Like, FIFA have been very vocal about the fact that they want to continue making the FIFA games. And I suppose the question is, if it's not going to be Take-Two, then who the hell is it going to be?
Yeah, I think if FIFA are intending to make games like they've been making games over the past couple of decades, then Take-Two are almost the only way to go, unless... I don't know, unless another big publisher does step in. I can't really imagine Sony or Microsoft going for it, and making it exclusive. The thing to me comes back to what EA said, though. EA referred to it as just a name on the box, and EA has also announced that they are keeping all the licenses that they've got with clubs and players. So I'm not totally certain what a Take-Two deal with FIFA would give them, other than the ability to use the name FIFA. They might still then need to go and negotiate all the other licenses and stuff, which, I don't know, even a publisher like Take-Two might look at it and go, this isn't worth it, while there is EA Sports FC out there that's, is going to take a portion of the market, if not the entirety of what it used to do. So I think it's a riskier bit of business for Take-Two or any big publisher than we might be anticipating. I can't help but think that what FIFA might do is splinter off and publish with a lot of different partners and make things like a FIFA Ultimate Team style game, like a deck builder type thing, or mobile arcadey type games, and putting the FIFA name on things rather than solely going down the Sims route. But if they do make another football sim with a FIFA name on it, I think it pretty much has to be Take-Two that do it.
Yeah, to be honest with you, I am genuinely struggling to think of any other publisher that would be in a better position to do it than Take-Two. I cannot fathom who else would be.
Can you imagine if Konami took the license?
Finally, Lewis, pro heaven, we don't have to put in all the names by ourselves. God, remember that back in the day. Different times. All right, Lewis, news item number 4. The latest financial report from Square Enix seems to indicate that they are looking to establish new studios or buy new ones. This comes only a few weeks after they have sold most of their Western studios to Embracer Group for $300 million, including Crystal Dynamics, Eidos Montreal, Square Enix Montreal, and a whole host of IP, including Tomb Raider and Deus Ex. They have now said that they want to grow through a section and concentration of company resources, and they want to reshape their digital entertainment portfolio by creating new IP, speeding up decision making, and by, quotes, boosting game development capabilities by establishing new studios, M&As, etc., M&As being mergers and acquisitions. Which is all very well and good. However, the point in all this is almost certainly for them to realign their business, and the reason that they would want to realign their business is so that they can invest more in AI, cloud gaming, and of course blockchain, which is what they said that they would do after they sold the western parts of their business. This does seem slightly wild that they would be talking about establishing new studios or mergers and acquisitions after they've just sold a large part of their business on what appears to be the cheap, basically. But if you're planning to open studios, they could easily just be focusing on cloud gaming, or they could easily just be focusing on fucking NFT gaming or whatever. So maybe it does make sense in that capacity, but yeah, this is a bit of a strange one for me after just selling a huge part of your business,
Definitely a strange one. Quite hard to get your head around why this would be happening, or why Square would have taken some of the decisions that it has done recently. I think on top of what you were saying there about their stated intention to kind of move into the blockchain game and look into that horrible world, I do wonder as well whether it's a bit of a reflection on what has happened to that part of the market in the past year. So when they announced that those Western studios are being sold, when we read through it, it said that it was part of their 2021 business plan, basically, and that maybe now a year later they're thinking they might actually have to do some other stuff and not rely solely on blockchain gaming,
Let's hope so.
Yeah, let's definitely hope so. I mean, hopefully at worst this is going to be, some new mobile studios or something like that, or just even some new Japanese studios. Maybe they are going to double down. That's what you were saying when the sales happened, that is their bread and butter and they should just kind of stick to that. So
sure, yeah.
That
not
would
that
be
they
good.
should just stick to that, but that should be their bread and butter.
Yeah, reinforce that,
should be where. Yeah, exactly. That's where their heart should be.
Yeah, hopefully it's something along those lines, but it does sound a bit like kind of expansion into a dark place potentially on the horizon for Square. Yeah, wish that they'd just made their Western Studios work and kind of kept that library open rather than selling it into kind of obscurity as it is at the moment. We don't really know if Embracer Group will ever act on that because they've not really done a lot with the other properties they own yet. So, but yeah, it would be interesting to see what Square do next.
Yeah, I'm not really sure what to make of all this. I don't feel great about it, to be honest, as they continue to mention that they want to go into blockchain stuff and they want to go into NFTs, and I'm just like, please just go and focus on making good games, Square.
Yeah.
Like, please just go and make some actual good games and fucking forget all this nonsense. Just make the good games and people will buy them and they will enjoy them and your company will succeed. You don't need any of this bullshit, you know? Yeah, it's worrying signs. All right, Lewis, finishing off as we always do with a couple of shout-outs. Shout-out number 1, the Silent Hill rumour mill has been in full effect this week, Lewis. Oh my, has it. Basically, the reason for this is twofold. One, a proven leaker has posted 4 images allegedly from Silent Hill that have been taken down from Twitter by a DMCA notice, meaning that they almost certainly were from Silent Hill. And secondly, because Bluebird team CEO Piotr Babinio made this statement to IGN at a Polish gaming conference.
We can't comment on anything we're doing because we appreciate our relationship with our partners, of course. So we can't say anything. We will make an announcement about our future projects as soon as we can. So then you will know much more officially.
And, I mean, you can't say that. He's obviously just given the game away. I mean, I really wish that Konami would just announce what they are doing with Silent Hill. These rumours have been all over the place for absolutely ages. There was also a rumour that they were going to announce all of this at E3 last year before they pulled out. And now we're nearly a full year on, and we've still got absolutely nothing. But we almost certainly know what we're getting at this point. There's been so many rumours compounding. Again, it's the no smoke without fire situation here, right? We basically know that we're getting a Silent Hill 2 remake from Bluebird team. There seems to be some mainline Silent Hill game coming as well from an undisclosed Japanese studio. There almost certainly seems to be something coming from a smaller studio as well, potentially something that is episodic Telltale style, or potentially something that is more along the lines of Until Dawn. Apparently VGC have heard that Annapurna could be involved in that, but by their own admission, things could very easily have moved on significantly since their involvement. Like, what do they lose by holding back on this announcement at this point, Lewis?
It does seem odd that you wouldn't just get out ahead of it now, given that it is basically known and confirmed news, essentially. I mean, we've been talking about these Silent Hill rumours. I think since we started doing this podcast, quite genuinely, there's been rumours and ideas about what might be coming. And particularly this rumour of like multiple projects coming at once has been floating around for months now. I think it's a certainty. Not massively excited about a Silent Hill 2 remake from Bluebird, just given the reactions to the medium, but hopefully those other projects amount to something quite interesting and a bit of a reboot for the series. Resident Evil's had a real shot in the arm from its kind of remakes and reintroductions and evolutions over the last couple of years, and maybe Silent Hill could do something similar. Yeah,
that would be great, and re-establish Konami as a force in video games again.
Yeah.
Well, or a good one. All right, shout out number 2. The South Korean ratings board, which is always good for a leak, Lewis, has rated both Marvel's Midnight Suns and Ubisoft's Skull and Bones, meaning that both could be released imminently, which might not be a surprise for Midnight Suns, as it was always slated to release in the second half of this year, but Skull and Bones was officially revealed during E3 2017. 5 years ago, as close as makes no difference, Lewis, and it was supposed to initially release in Q3/4 2018, and since then it's been delayed and delayed and delayed and rebooted and delayed, and the latest delay does have it coming out this year, but I don't think that means anything because the delay before this had it coming out the year before this, so that means nothing. Anyway, I think that Marvel's Midnight Suns coming is potentially quite exciting. I know that you were excited by this one, Lewis. Skull and Bones, I'll fucking believe it when I see it.
Absolutely agree with you on that one, Mark. I don't believe this is coming. I'll believe it when I see it. if it is going to come this year, then surely we're going to get a proper re-announcement of it in the summer from Ubisoft, because I mean we don't even know what to expect from that game anymore. It's gone quiet for so long, and as you say, it's been rebooted and it seemed to be dead for quite a long time, but this leak suggests maybe it's been quietly kind of plodding along. We'll see. For Marvel's Midnight Suns though, yeah, I'm quite interested in that. I want to see what that turns into. I think it was originally slated for March this year actually, so it definitely seems like a feasible release in sort of September, October time, hopefully. And yeah, it'd be great to get a view of that soon.
Yeah, definitely. I've got to say, I was looking at some gameplay of that not that long ago. I'm not sure how I feel about it, man, but I'm glad that you're into it. Speaking of all these dates, Lewis, the Dead Space remake has got a release date, and it's January the 27th, 2023. This is the remake being done by EA's Motive. They announced this during a live stream where they were also showing off some of the graphical improvements that they were making to the game. And I have to say, man, I think it looks pretty good. The Dead Space games are very much something that passed me by. I'm not really a big horror guy. I dare say it's the same for you, Lewis. Not that you're not a big horror guy, but just that it's passed you by. It's just a franchise that you never caught on to when we were younger. But I think that this looks really great, and to be honest with you, it's probably the first EA game that I've been genuinely excited about in a long time.
Yeah, you're totally right. This one, it did pass me by when I was a bit younger, and it's one that I've been really interested to get to grips with because it's a bit of a cult favourite for people. And yeah, I really like horror games, generally speaking, and I like horror cinema a lot, so I'm quite keen to see what this is doing. And I totally agree with your last point there. Don't often get very excited about EA games generally. Jedi Fallen Order feels like the last one that jumps out, but hopefully this is just the start of a kind of rebooted franchise for them that is enjoyable and not predatory in any way and doesn't, fall down EA's usual traps. Like, hopefully they've learned something from Jedi Fallen Order actually about the success that they can have with straightforward single player games,
Yeah, it's almost like if you make a good game, then it will be successful.
Yeah, fancy that.
You don't have to fill it full of fucking shitty microtransactions. Alright, let's shout out number 4 and ugh. Okay, so PlayStation's CEO Jim Ryan has made some very stupid and totally unnecessary comments about abortion's right that is something that he should just massively shut the fuck up about, I feel. This, of course, comes in the wake of a leaked draft of the decision of the US Supreme Court that will overturn Roe v. Wade, which protects the rights of women to seek abortions without excessive government restrictions. Jim Ryan decided that now, obviously, was exactly the time to send out an email to all his staff saying to respect differences of opinion on abortion rights. An email which also apparently included several paragraphs about his cat's birthday, and that is not a joke. Somehow that is not a joke, Lewis. While he also said that respect does not equal agreement, but respect does imply that the other side of the argument has some merit, which in this case, of course, it does not. Now, I understand that in some parts of the world, not least of which America, this is something of a hot issue. However, when one side of the argument is protecting potentially life-saving healthcare for women and protecting bodily autonomy, and the other side of the argument is unilaterally trying to remove those rights, largely based on fucking fundamentalist religious beliefs, so far as I can tell, that side of the argument doesn't deserve respect, and quite frankly can go and fuck itself as far as I'm concerned. Now, to save me going on what I'm sure will be a massive angry tirade of a rantless, I instead would like you to read a very different statement from Bungie, the studio that PlayStation is currently in the process of buying, which has a very different message. Take it away.
At Bungie, we believe that everyone has a right to choose their own path and that freedom is expressed across all facets of life. The leaked draft decision by the US Supreme Court to overturn Roe v. Wade represents a blow to freedom in America, and it is a direct attack on human rights. By creating a divide between those who possess the fundamental right to make healthcare decisions that are right for them and those who do not possess that same freedom, this decision, should it become final, will have far-reaching consequences that will be felt for generations across socio-economic lines. Bungie is committed to safeguarding the freedom and privacy of its employees and providing support to all employees affected by this decision. Standing up for reproductive choice and liberty is not a difficult decision to make, and Bungie remains dedicated to upholding these values.
Hear, hear, Bungie. Very, very well said indeed. I really do feel for the people in America who have to deal with this bullshit on a regular basis. From an outsider looking in, it does seem as though that country's been on a fucking backwards track since all the Trump shit happened, Luce. But what I will say is that Bungie ends their statement with a bunch of links to various charities that you can donate to, various US organisations that protect healthcare and protect abortion rights. I would encourage anyone who feels strongly about this issue to donate to those charities or similar charities, because God knows in the near future they will be needing your support.
Yeah, absolutely. Get out there and support these people if you can. Yeah, I want to give a huge shout out to Bungie, really, for not only for that statement and how they've gone about representing this, but also the fact that they stuck to their guns on social media and kept replying to people who were telling them, keep politics out of gaming, we just want our games. They were saying, like, no, this is not a place that we can do that, and, this is not an issue that we can do that for. It's really important to keep this on the agenda and to keep that argument up, because, yeah, it is a robbery of people's rights. It is an attack on women's rights in particular, and it is a slippery slope. And us here in the UK, like, we tend to just do what America does, but a wee while later there have been pickets outside sexual health clinics and abortion hospitals here in the UK, here in Glasgow even, very recently. So we all need to keep an eye on this shit and do what we can to combat it.
Yeah, definitely, man. It's scary time. Scary time. All right, and on that absolute fucking downer, I think it's time for a beer, and then we will be back for Topic of the Week, Liz. And we are back for Topic of the Week. Topic of the Week this week: have services and acquisitions papered over the cracks at Xbox, Liz?
It is indeed, Mark. Yeah, a wee bit of a devil's advocate one this week, but I wanted to just kind of dive a bit deeper into this week's delays of Starfield and Redfall, and kind of talk a bit more broadly about what has been happening at Xbox, or maybe more accurately, not happening at Xbox over the last few years. So yeah, it's been disappointing news this week for Xbox players, with a delay of 2 major games, which mean that there, as we were describing earlier, there is no major 2022 release coming from Xbox as it stands, and we'll underline as it stands, at least until the June showcase is out of the way. Last year, there was only kind of 1 or 2 games around, obviously Forza and a Halo game that got, a bit of a mixed reaction, all things told, given the sort of response to the multiplayer down the line, as well as Psychonauts 2 a bit earlier in the year. But really, Mark, since the start of the pandemic, over 2 years ago, they haven't really released much more in the way of major games in that time, maybe other than Flight Simulator, Ori and the Will of the Wisps, and Gears Tactics. There hasn't been tons there. And now, of course, obviously, we will be saying, but look at next year, because that's sort of what keeps happening with Xbox at the moment. There's always something on the horizon, and those things will pay off, and the dam will burst, and those games will come, and everything will look great again. And certainly, it's really not been a great few years for Xbox, and it's hard to argue that in games terms, solely in games terms, that they've really made up any ground on Sony since the launch of the previous generation of consoles. My first question to you really is, like, to what extent do you think revolutions, genuine revolutions like Game Pass and xCloud, have kind of papered over these cracks at Microsoft? Do you think that people like us as gaming commentators have maybe been guilty of overlooking failures on the games front because of the success of like pro-consumer moves like Game Pass?
Interesting question. I think probably a little, to be honest, yeah. But having said that, like, I feel as though in a certain sense, Xbox are just sort of playing a different game now a little bit. You know what I mean? They're not really concerned about... Well, having said that, that flies in the face of what Matt Booty says, where he wants to release a game every quarter, apparently.
Yeah, absolutely.
But in a lot of ways, I'm not really sure that that is really necessary or for Xbox, or really what they should be trying to do. Again, they should just be trying to bolster Games Pass as much as possible, and that's where they have made significant ground on Sony, to the point that Sony have had no response to it up until now, and we're about to get that response years down the line, you know? But yeah, I mean, I don't think that there's really any denying that solely on the games front, they have still been, in reality, quite a distance behind Sony, in my opinion anyway. And don't get me wrong, as you said, like, the future looks bright for Xbox. It does. Between the Bethesda purchase, there are other studio purchases, Double Fine and Ninja Theory jumping to mind specifically, as well as whatever's coming from Activision as well. Like, there's going to be games all over the place, I reckon, to be honest with you, and maybe they will eventually be able to hit that one new game every quarter. But yeah, I think in this sort of interim time, And specifically, really, I'm thinking of since the launch of the Series X, it's been quite barren from the Xbox side, really. It really has, you know what I mean? It's sort of hard to overlook that. Don't get me wrong, obviously Forza, absolute smash success. Halo, it arrived, it was great, particularly the campaign. I think a lot of people liked it. Gameplay, pretty good, but its tail has really been hampered quite significantly, I think, by just lack of support for their multiplayer, which is a real shame because that is at least half the battle when it comes to a Halo game, you know? But yeah, it's really sort of sad to see that on your second year into a console cycle, you're releasing literally no games in a calendar year. That seems absolutely insane. And even after this June showcase, like, what are we expecting here? Like, maybe one game coming this year? Again, I said Hellblade, and I'm thinking maybe that's a good shout. But other than that, I'm really struggling to think of anything that they will be bringing out this year. So it's maybe Hellblade, and if not Hellblade, then nothing as far as I can work out, you know?
Yeah, well, absolutely. And I think that does, you know, it's easy, and you even kind of said it there, to be like, but things are okay because of Game Pass. Game Pass has caught up the ground and even surpassed Sony in a lot of ways.
Yeah, maybe, exactly. Maybe I'm just doing it again. Maybe I'm just falling into the same hole.
But that also, like, at the moment, they're reliant on a service that is itself reliant on third-party games and indie titles, which Xbox has no control over the quality of those. So that feels risky to me a wee bit. Like, you have to be able eventually to back up the Game Pass library with your own stamp of quality, in my eyes, because otherwise people will start saying, as we've been doing a wee bit recently, like, oh, it's swimming in sevens. You know, if people start to think, well, there's nothing major on it, nothing on the slate from Xbox in the near future, then I won't bother subscribing for a while yet. Not to mention all the DRM shit that we saw last week, which kind of made a lot of Game Pass anything on Xbox a bit superfluous. I guess, like, my kind of question here is, like, is there a fundamental problem at Xbox? Like, how is it that we can have had several years in a row where they've really struggled to launch more than one game, and this year possibly won't launch a game at all? Like, how can we be, what are we, nearly 10 years on from the launch of the Xbox One, like that disastrous launch? And surely at that point all their planning and all their thinking must have been about how we make games regularly so we can release once a quarter, and they aren't doing that. Like, how are we there, given how much Phil Spencer particularly is beloved in the industry?
Yeah, I mean, yeah, it's hard to sort of explain, I suppose. Like you said, I think that we're still sort of getting to the point where they are even capable of that, really, to be honest with you. With all the studio acquisitions and whatever, like, if you strip away all those studio acquisitions from Xbox, like, what would they have? Not a lot, I would argue. You know what I mean? It's certainly in comparison to what Sony now have. Well, even stripping away their recent acquisitions, Sony would have way more studios, like native Sony studios compared to native Xbox studios. Do you know what I mean? But yeah, all the acquisitions put them in a really good position going forward. And as you said, it's always like, oh yeah, one more year sort of thing. But again, as you also said, the dam is going to burst here. Like, I do think that the future is bright. But in terms of, like, how did they get to this position, I'm not really sure that is really the fault of Phil Spencer. Like, I think Phil Spencer's done an incredible job of, well, getting Games Pass out and working and doing what he's doing, but also bringing in these acquisitions. I just don't think that we've really seen the fruits of that yet, is sort of what I'm getting at, you know?
I think that's spot on, really. I mean, acquisitions is obviously the other big part of this question, and like Game Pass, just the news of acquisitions change the whole view of Xbox and the whole view of the gaming industry, really. You know, particularly the Bethesda and Activision deals. They're buying up promise, but they've still not delivered anything from these acquisitions, really. And I do wonder again if the games media and the commentariat have been a bit blinded by the enormity of the news and not really critiqued. I mean, that mergers and acquisitions plan, which absolutely Phil Spencer should be, and his team and all of those people should be lauded for. Like, they've gone out and they have done business. But they haven't bought a studio that was in a position to release a game in quite some time. Like, you know, again, here we are with Bethesda. Their entire slate was based on 2 Bethesda games for this year. Again, as we understand it at the moment, they did a deal with Bethesda a while ago. They had 2 games due to come out this calendar year, none from their homegrown studios, their native studios, as you said. like they hadn't even planned to have a game come out from previously owned Xbox studios this year, and now the Bethesda games haven't made it either. I don't know, that doesn't speak amazingly for the wisdom of your acquisitions necessarily. Again, delays happen and that's also fine, but there's just, I don't know, there's something there. I mean, I am playing devil's advocate here because I think largely this is bad luck. We are still talking about development in a pandemic. I do think that probably Xbox's leadership's eyes have been taken off the ball a wee bit in terms of games development because of the enormity of the services and acquisitions that they are trying to put out into the market. But yeah, I just think Xbox gamers have every right to feel a bit aggrieved about how things have been for the last few years, not just this year, in terms of those big system sellers. They've just not been getting them, and Xbox still can't kind of deliver them as regularly as PlayStation can.
Yeah, and again, I'm not really sure what the answer to that is. I mean, I think that you're right. I think that, yeah, the pandemic's still affecting game development. It is. We don't hear about it quite so much, but it is, and the knock-on effect will probably be felt for many years to come still, to be honest. But yeah, I don't know if it's just sort of bad planning. As you said, without the Bethesda games, their homegrown studios would have released nothing this year and weren't planning on releasing anything this year. So yeah, I don't know if maybe with those acquisitions coming, they've felt as though they've not had to do that.
Yeah.
And that they thought, oh, well, we have 2 Bethesda games coming this year, so our studios can sit back and wait and develop their games at the pace that they are comfortable with rather than trying to force something out the door. As I said when we were talking about this in the news, I do think that this is the right decision for these games, like 100%. Like, if the options are release a bad game, or delay it,
or make the staff work so hard on it to get it out the door, all of those things are not preferable to delay.
100%, delay it, absolutely delay it, 100%. But nonetheless, I think that you have to release games consistently. Consistency was what Phil Spencer was basically saying in his tweet, like, that's where they've fallen down here. And I'm not really sure that there is much of an excuse for that, to be honest with you. Like, they should be planning to have at least 2 games per year. And fair enough, that might not happen. And I suppose they were planning on having these 2 games. But you want them, like, locked in. Like, for as you said, Redfall, I never thought I had a hope in hell of making it this year. Yeah. And I perfectly willing to admit that I'm probably in the minority here, but I genuinely didn't think that Starfield was going to hit this year either. But I know that a lot of people did think that. And due to all the marketing, I can't really blame them. Do you know what I mean?
No, the boldness of putting a date on a game that far out. I think that when they announced it, it was the furthest out launch date that we'd basically ever had, I think. So, you know, they really set their story out there and it's blown up in their face a bit. And I do think that there's a bit of possibly bad management. There's certainly questions to be asked about that and about the wisdom of putting all your eggs in the basket of 2 games that were both definitely going to be winter games anyway, you know, so you're already touch and go. Even a delay of a few weeks could have pushed them into the next year. I guess just one final question mark to wrap up. Do you think 2023 will be the year the dam bursts? Are we going to get an absolute barrage of games from Xbox, or do you think they'll space them out, maybe unintentionally, but or they might well decide to go to a model where they're able to release 3 games in the year rather than releasing all 7 just because it happens to be next year that they're ready?
I think that we might get, if I had to put a number on it, I think that we might get about 4 Xbox games next year. Including Bethesda games and whatever, which is a good slate of games for anyone in a year. I think that most publishers are probably aiming for like at least 2, probably 3. Do you know what I mean? If one of them gets delayed, then whatever, you know? And I think that you probably will get both of the Bethesda games. You might get a Hellblade or something like that, or an Avowed. Like, I expect there to be several games dated for 2023 in this June showcase, and sort of anticipating that a couple of them probably won't make it. Yeah, I could see 3, maybe 4 games coming next year. So, well, I don't think that's necessarily the dam bursting, so to speak. Like, I think that is a good, healthy amount of games to release in a year, yes.
Yeah, certainly better than none, so let's hope they
much
can
better
manage
than
that.
None. Much better than none, yeah. And again, if we do get to the end of this year and PlayStation have released more games on Xbox than Xbox, that would be quite something, Liz.
Definitely.
Alright, ladies and gentlemen, I think we'll have to call it a day there. I'd like to remind everyone that you can find Players2 on all the social media, that is Facebook, Twitter, YouTube, Instagram, the lot. You can also find our written content over at PlayersToo.com. That's PlayerSToo.com. And if you could take 5 seconds to give us 5 stars over on Apple Podcasts or wherever you get your podcasts, that really, really, really helps us out. It does a huge amount for the exposure of the show. And while you're over there, if you could leave us a little review as well, again, that just helps us out even more. And thank you so much to anyone that's already done that for us. You're an absolute legend to us. I'd like to remind everyone that our PlayAlong games, 2 of this month, are the Black Iris and Welcome to Elk. The Black Iris is only about a 30-minute experience, and Welcome to Elk seems to be about 4 hours. Both of these games were part of itch.io's Ukraine bundle, which is why we've decided to play them. But also we decided to play them because they look fucking awesome, Liz.
They do indeed, yeah. Really excited to get started with these. I think I've got a bit of an empty this weekend, and I might well get stuck into them at that point, because I think otherwise that'll be 2 days of Elden Ring, and that might be too much.
That may be too much. That may be too much for any man list, to be fair. Particularly if you're going into Caelid. Jesus fucking Christ. Anyway, at the risk of this becoming the Elden Ring podcast again.
The start of next week's podcast. Just keep going.
Yeah, I think that we will have to call it a day there. We will see you next week, ladies and gentlemen.
Thanks.